Welcome to the ERC Pros podcast with that Friends music intro. That music always gets me happy.
It's a great song.
It's so good. My co-host today, with Jared Dyer. My co-host today, with producing Jared Dyer.
I'm the guy that laughs in the background.
Yeah, but my co-host today
I feel like more like a third anchor.
I can't tell if you're Jeremy Arthur or if you're Sean and you just shaved your beard.
Oh, that's such a compliment.
For both of you.
I know.
The beardless wonder, Jeremy Arthur, thank you for being in the podcast live with us today.
So excited to be here.
So good.
Just so excited to be here. I can't grow a beard like Sean, so that's why I have to shave it.
That's okay. We have a special guest with us today. Very special. Instead of doing an intro, I think we're just going to spend like 40 minutes and talk about you. How about we do that?
That sounds so fun.
Okay, so we have Ashleigh Rawson in studio, and this is a big deal. It's a really big deal because she doesn't spell her name A-S-H. Jared, spelling bee time. How do you spell the name Ashleigh?
A-S-H-E-I-G-H.
That is actually wrong. That was wrong, wasn't it? You forgot an L. No, most people spell the name Ashleigh like a normal human, but Ashleigh is from Hawaii. And so Ashleigh, let the listeners know how you spell your name.
A-S-H-L-E-I-G-H.
I just missed
the most exciting part of these people's day.
It's true.
Learning.
You can give that to me. I only missed that.
And then before we get started, just tell everybody how you say the word Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hawaii.
So we're working on it.
It sounds way better when she says it. It does.
Wrong isn't always better, Jeremy.
That's true.
No, so Ashleigh, really good to have you in the studio. So first off, I love like all the different perspectives that we're getting from these different podcasts. We've only done, I think this is our sixth one or something, right? And so we shouldn't have waited this long to have maybe the greatest female salesman of all time on the podcast. You should have probably been the first, but Isaac made a really big deal about how he
wanted to be first.
He honestly, it was so relentless, but that's why he's so good.
Persistence pays off.
Yeah, enough about Isaac. So no, Ashleigh, I can't wait actually to get into this podcast because you're very interesting and your past is really, really cool. A lot of the people that have been on kind of have been at Clear Home for a long time. This is where they started, all that. You're the most famous person at Clear Home. You're a celebrity. And I met you through Netflix. You were on a Netflix documentary. So
is that true?
Oh, yeah. So tell everybody where you're from a little bit, and then let's get into the juicy stuff. Part 5 of the LulaRoe documentary series.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, it's not Netflix. It's Amazon Prime, which is like third tier entertainment.
No, it's literally.
I would say it's way better.
Yeah.
Amazon Prime's better.
Yeah.
And football.
Well, Thursday night.
Yeah.
Come on, Kirk Herbstreit. Okay, keep going.
So yeah, I'm Ashleigh. I'm one of the regionals here at Clear. I'm from Hawaii. I've lived in Utah for a couple years. I love working here. I hate talking about myself, actually, so I don't know what else to say.
Okay, so you grew up in Hawaii. How long were you in Hawaii for?
I was born in Hawaii, and then we moved to California when I was 4. Then we moved to Utah when I was 5, I think. And then we moved to the Big Island of Hawaii when I was 11. Then we moved to Western Samoa, and I turned 12 there, so like somewhere between 11 and 12. And then we moved to New Zealand, which is where I went to some high school. And then I lived in Anchorage for a little bit, and then Nevada for a little bit, and then I moved back to New Zealand. Then I moved to Maui, and then I moved to Washington, and now I'm here.
Okay, let's make this a two-parter.
Yeah.
That is so much more interesting than I thought.
Yeah.
Really?
I was not expecting that.
Did you even say Seattle? Tacoma?
Washington, yeah.
Oh, we did
Washington,
say that.
yeah.
Sorry, I lost track. That's crazy. Okay, so you were all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to hate when people would be like, where are you from? I'd be like, well, I've lived here and here. But growing up, looking back, I feel like I had a really cool experience living in lots of different places. So
Okay. Well, I wasn't joking about that documentary there. I do want to talk about that because it really is interesting to me. So, there's a company there's a documentary on, it's actually on Amazon Prime. If you didn't know, but it's a 4-part series. So this is like, at the end of a season of Real Housewives, and they do like, okay, now the tell-alls. That's what it's called. So I'm going to tell Jesse Christensen we're doing a Bravo tell-all of the LulaRoe. First off, how do you pronounce the name of that company?
LulaRoe.
LulaRoe. Okay.
Yeah.
LulaRoe was a giant. Explain to everybody what LulaRoe was.
So LulaRoe was an MLM, multi-level marketing, and we sold clothes for women, just like stretchy, comfortable clothes.
A lot of
American-made,
leggings.
Lots of leggings. We actually started with maxi skirts. So I was the third retailer in the company, and I started with them when they were like making maxi skirts in the owner's garage, right? So I just found them through social media, and somehow she convinced me to sell her maxi skirts, and that's kind of how I got started with them. But it became a really big company in the first couple of years.
At one point, you had 6,000 reps under you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We had a pretty
Let me
big
say
team.
that again, Jer. 6,000 reps under her.
Yeah, I don't know who else can say that.
Very few people.
Very few people. That's very impressive.
I'm sure there were lots of people in LulaRoe who could say that, but
I promise you there's probably not. So
Not many people sitting at this desk have said that.
Yeah. So first, I want to talk a little bit about that. So timing matters, right? I believe the cream can rise to the top of like any organization, but I do think that timing matters. You saw from like you said, I mean, you were the first like probably employee, like the third person there, whatever. And then you went through the giant growth. And if you watch the documentary, it's actually like super interesting and stuff. And then where it is now, but. Did you ever, so first off, before you started, did you consider yourself a recruiter?
not at all.
A salesman?
Zero.
Okay.
Not at all.
So what drew you to that opportunity?
I mean, I don't know. It just kind of swept me up in it. I had just graduated from college and I had my 2 little kids and, I don't know. I called the owner and I was just wanting to buy a maxi skirt, and I guess it was probably just her energy, right? I was like, what are you guys doing? I just want to buy a maxi skirt. And she was just so excited about what she was doing. Her name was Deanne. And she was excited. So I was excited, and she didn't really give me the chance to say no. She shipped me some maxi skirts to sell. And
you were the first distributor of a giant.
Yeah. And then I was the third. Yeah. I was the third one.
Where was this at? Where did this happen?
So I was living in Tacoma, Washington, and their production was happening in California.
So they shipped you the skirts. When did you go from selling them yourself, I mean, wearing them, selling them, to recruiting other people to and start building that network? Because to get from that to 6,000 of anything is just that is an amazing job of scaling something, right? And so, when did you transition into, hey, I want to make this opportunity something for my friends, and walk us through that?
So that was, let me think about that. So again, like I really feel like the opportunity kind of swept me up in it, but I think, so my goal was to make like $1,000 for Christmas, right? I wanted to like buy our family's Christmas. And so I was I didn't know anyone. We had just moved to Washington. So I was going to like little vendor events and setting up there and just kind of meeting people and creating relationships with people. And I met this girl named Lindsay Wheeler, and she was also a vendor at the event. And she was selling like refinished furniture. And she was obsessed with the clothes, loved them, loved the maxi skirts. I don't remember if we had leggings, or maybe we would like just come out with leggings at the time. But she booked a party, and I went out to her house, and she had like 30 girls there, and there were leggings flying everywhere, and it was really a great time. Actually, there was just like when you went to a party, it was so fun. I don't know. It was just, there was nothing like a good LulaRoe party.
Just girls being girls.
Just girls being girls. Yeah. Yeah. So
Very similar to a night out with Jared Dyer.
Yes.
leggings flying everywhere.
Lots of Chuck E. Cheese parties back in the day.
So did you focus more on selling the clothes or recruiting distributors?
It was always selling clothes. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at is it was something that people were drawn to because it was fun. And so I met Lindsay, and that was kind of the start of like when I wanted to recruit. So she called me a couple weeks later and she was like, hey, I was thinking, that was like a really fun time. Would I be like stepping on your toes if I decided to sell this stuff? And I was like, nah, go for it. Like, that's fine. There's plenty of room for everybody. And we just kind of became really good friends. And we were like, let's do this thing. Like, let's sell a bunch of clothes and make a bunch of money. And all of a sudden there was like momentum and people were excited about it and people wanted to do what we were doing. And when you can create that energy around something, like people want to be a part of it. And when people want to be a part of something, like cool things happen, I think.
Yeah. So there's some people that are listening to this that probably have never recruited to something that probably realize like, hey, this job's awesome. I'm really excited about it. How do I replicate this over and over, right? And so the two things that you said there that are to me the most like the number one and two things it takes to be a good recruiter, you touched on it. Number one is energy behind it. Like you need to have energy, and then energy and enthusiasm, and then once you got momentum, you obviously stayed on that to get to from there to 6,000 of anything, right? And so so you created the momentum. How did you guys keep the momentum going? Because I think a lot of people that have done some recruiting, they've had times when they've had momentum and it almost seems like you can recruit anybody. And then when you lose it, it almost seems like it's the hardest thing in the world. Jerry, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to get back to. It feels like when you lose that momentum, it's almost like you. Yeah, I'm interested to know how long did it take you to go from buying it to having 6,000 people underneath you? Was that how long?
I feel like that was probably like year 2 or 3 that it was like at its peak. I think it was like year 2 or 3.
See, that seems so fast. Like
because that's
so
nothing
fast.
I could have done by myself, right?
Yeah.
Like when you have 30 or 40 or 50 people who are wanting to recruit, like that multiplies quickly. That's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you have a good core of leaders and people who are excited about what you're excited about.
Now that's something that Trost always preaches is Trost is a really good recruiter, motivator, but Trost doesn't go out and recruit 6,000 people by himself. You don't go and recruit 6,000 people by yourself. You have to go get, your sphere of influence excited enough to go out and recruit their friends and their 1, 2, 3 people like.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like what you said about energy and momentum together, right? Energy and enthusiasm. I think that words can only go so far. You can pitch someone on an opportunity. You can pretend you're excited about an opportunity, but our mantra was always like success is the best recruiting tool, right? If you're busy, if you are spending your time booking parties and selling and, pulling people into what you're doing, they are going to want to do what you're doing, right? That's the best proof of all is seeing that you're successful at what you do. And I think that carries over to any product. Like that carried over to recruiting for ERC. That carried over to,
I like that. Success is the best recruiting tool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So
Jared, can we make that into a shirt?
Yes, I'll make it a V-neck.
Thank you.
Oh, a V-neck. That's pretty exciting.
Fancy.
Better be low.
Okay. So you've had times when you were like anytime there's 6,000 people looking at you as a leader, looking at you as a mentor, there's almost stardom that comes with that, right? There's like there's almost like a rock star persona that you start to like people like, oh my gosh, wait, you're Ashleigh. Oh my gosh. Why do you spell your name that way? But other than that, you're like my motivation. Like I want to be like you someday, right?
Sure.
So, did you let it go to your head a little bit?
I mean, it was fun. It was fun for people to know my name for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, okay, but you're not there anymore. And so I don't want to spill the tea too much. You're going to have to watch the documentary to get all the juicy details. But transitioning from that into what was going to be next, sometimes I think when you've been at the top of something, when you've been super successful with something, transitioning into your next thing can just be, God, you're used to being at the top, and you're used to having that much influence and that many people working with you, and you're feeding off that energy too and things. And so, how was the transition going from that into the ERC project that you're with? And I don't know, that might be like a personal question or something,
No,
but
that's
I'm
okay.
I am curious about that.
Yeah, I haven't really ever thought of it in that context, I guess, because I very intentionally moved away from that role. It was a really awesome 9 years, and it was also a really intense 9 years. And so I for sure chose to step away from that role. That wasn't something that I was like craving in my career path. And so it almost took more effort to be excited about stepping back into a leadership role than, to like, I don't know, humble myself or whatever to start from the beginning. Does that answer your question?
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So, okay. So, and then this ERC opportunity came up. And
Yeah.
so Jeremy, it's funny. So Jared and I have worked together for a long time, and I've always talked about, gosh, I want so badly for some female, like our industry. And this is, I really think people inside of ERC, this is great, but there are females in the direct marketing world and the sales world that you guys probably share a lot of like common, roadblocks and all these different things. So I think that like a lot of this information is probably good for any female in an environment like this, right? I've always said the best, like the number one rep in our company, there's a lot of years it's a female, even though they might only make up 5 or 10% of our whole sales force, right? So when a female's good at this job, they're usually amazing at it, and I've noticed that with you too. And so, what was it like coming into this company? And I think this is a fair question. Like, this is a company where there's a lot of guys, and there's a little bit of like, I don't want to call it a rowdy culture, because it's not. It's just there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of like, everyone. The environment's like really fun, and especially like inside the office, like there's a gym. There's people running
Basketball
around.
court,
There's
yes.
people wrestling half the time.
Light up shoes, all the things.
Yeah, all the shoes, And so how is it stepping into that culture? I mean, coming from a world where there was maybe 10 dudes in the whole company of like, how big was LulaRoe? Like, I mean, it got pretty
At
giant.
its peak, it was 90,000 reps plus whatever executives, right?
Yeah, and how many men?
Not many.
Yeah, so you went from one extreme to almost like another extreme, right? And so
Right.
tell me about like just being in this world, being in this culture, being in this company. It's got to be interesting. So
yeah, it for sure has been really interesting. It's been really awesome, actually. I did for sure have mostly experience in like a female-dominated field. Network marketing tends to be stay-at-home moms who like have a skill set that they're not able to put to use in other dynamics. And so they take that skill set and they apply it to the product that they're presented with in network marketing, right? And I think that can be really powerful. It also can be very isolating. It kind of puts people in like a little box also, right? And so stepping into Clear Home, it was for sure interesting. I had never worked with so many dude bros.
Dude bros.
They're what I affectionately call my dude bros. And it was interesting to see like the level of camaraderie that happens when everyone gathers in an office, which is something that you don't really get in network marketing, right? It's just not, it doesn't happen. You're like not in the same place unless you're at a convention. And so coming into an office has been actually really, it's been a cool experience for sure. I think that the dynamics between a company that's dominated by men and by women are just very different. There have been a lot of things that I've been like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to hear about that for weeks. And everyone literally forgets about it by like 2 minutes later, which if I was working in a company full of women, I would be hearing about that for 6 weeks. Right. And so there are like pros and cons.
But then you have to like hear how awesome we were in our intramural basketball game.
But you guys never make me participate. So that's fine. I don't care about that. I don't know. I think there are so many pros and cons to both. But it definitely is like polar opposites. I think the cool thing that I've learned working here is that you don't have to overthink things. And if you can just kind of show up and be consistent without overthinking the problems, that things eventually work themselves out. And that's not something that I experienced really in my company before. I think there was a lot of talking around and around and around about things and things never happening and feeling like you really had to push uphill to make things happen. And the culture here is very different in that you voice your opinion and there is a whole army of people ready to move when it's time to move the needle. So that's kind of what I have seen as far as, a leadership perspective. And I don't know, I would say for the women in the sales world, I think it for me was a learning curve to learn how to like speak up at a table and to voice my opinion, and also how to like take up space in a room. But this has been like the safest place for me to learn that. And I've been really grateful for it. Yeah.
When you're in a room with like Jesse and I, do you ever feel like you might not get it? We're like always talking over each other. I'm sure that's like so fun. Is that fun? Is that fun? Is that a good question?
It's my favorite. It's my favorite thing about being here. No, I think sometimes women tend to not have quite as sharp of elbows, right? And so sometimes the things that we have to say it's harder to speak up. But working here, I've learned how to speak up and to voice my opinion in a way that's very true to me, but also gets heard. And the fact that that is possible here, I think speaks to the company culture and the fact that there is room for people.
Yeah. The thing that I've enjoyed working with you is you do bring an outsider's perspective that is very different from what we're used to. And I love that because we've worked with people for a long time. Like Tro said, a lot of people that we worked with for 5-10 years. So sometimes the same ideas tend to circle around or the same points of view tend to circle around. And I love working with you because you bring an outsider's perspective. You look at it from a completely different angle. And I think it helps us just take a step back and make sure that we're doing things the right way. And the other thing that I really respect about you is you're one of those, if I can say it, you're one of those, boss babe, single mom ladies, right? That you're balancing home and your kids. And I think it is interesting. Like, we would probably identify this industry as like mainly a masculine or male industry, right? But like the top 2 out of the top 3 people in our company are female, right? Mm-hmm. But they make up a small percentage of it, and so
now Caitlin Stamper's back. Caitlin was our number 1 rep in
100%.
DirecTV, and she, she's gotten through the learning curve, and now the numbers she's
top
throwing up
app rep.
are huge.
She was the top app rep in February, and so I just think, how do you balance that? Because I think you do a great job of doing all those things, but how do you balance like your personal life and those things? Because I feel like when you come into the office, you're always on your A game. You always come ready to work, and then when you go home, obviously, I think that you do a good job at that. So how do you balance those things, and what helps you stay grounded and kind of keep like a level set head when you're trying to balance those things?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's a huge compliment.
Absolutely.
Second, I think if we're speaking to women who are trying to balance it all, I would say first and foremost, make enough money to hire a house cleaner. Nobody cares if you're cleaning your house by yourself. Literally, no one cares. And it took me a long time to like let go of those expectations that I had on myself. I think there are a lot of things that as moms who work, we want to do the things that were
almost cliche,
modeled
right?
Yeah,
for
traditional.
us. Yeah, the traditional things. And there are things that don't actually make an impact. And maybe it makes an impact in someone's situation. But for me, there are things that I've decided don't make an impact. So it doesn't matter if I'm doing it or if I'm outsourcing it. So as a woman, as a mom, Figure out the things that are making an impact and make those things your non-negotiables. The rest of it can be flexible, right? So I guess that's a kind of a simple answer, but figure out what your non-negotiables are. For me, I have always had to travel a lot for work with LulaRoe or with this. And I like traveling for work, right? I'm sure that there are ways that I could figure out to do this without ever leaving my zip code, and I could still make a ton of money, but I like going out and like figuring out new markets and meeting new people. So for me, it has been a non-negotiable that the same people are with my kids and that my kids experience consistency. No matter what that consistency looks like, it's consistent, right? So I think giving yourself permission to figure out what those non-negotiables are and then just letting it look like what it needs to look like is really important, especially as a working mom. And then letting the rest of it go. If it's not a non-negotiable, like it doesn't need to ruin your day. There are plenty of days that there are things that look very much less than perfect at my house, but like it's not a part of my non-negotiables, so that's okay. Like I'm okay with that. I
like that. What makes an impact? And I think that that's something that can be carried over from not just our personal life, but like into business, into sales, right? Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about it a lot where the 80-20 principle, right? Where sometimes we get stuck spending 80% of our time on things that don't actually move the needle. I actually think that's one thing that you're really good at doing is prioritizing and seeing like, hey, there's 100 things we could be doing. Here's my list of prioritizations. How do you do that? Like, what's your process when you're like stepping back and like kind of prioritizing like what makes an impact? How do you do that in, specifically when it comes to like sales? Because I do feel like you actually are really good at that. Like when we come away from like a meeting where I'm like, I don't really quite know what the takeaways are. Maybe that's just the mother in you, but you really do a good job of coming back and saying, hey, here's our next 5 steps, where the men in us are probably just like, let's just go build the wall, right? Like let's just start running. But yeah, how do you like prioritize, and how do you kind of make that next, what makes an impact? How do you identify that?
I think as far as work goes, like I said, success is the best recruiting tool. I also think it's a great leadership tool. So if I don't know how to make an impact with clients, I feel like I don't know how to help my reps. And so that just kind of naturally rises to the top of my priority list, making sure that I'm taking care of my clients, making sure that I am learning what I need to learn in order to be successful personally. And the rest of it kind of just falls in order, right? There's always going to be things that are pulling at our attention that could be better, that could be more efficient. I mean, we all know, anyone who works with me knows that I love a good system. I love for things to be alphabetized and to have an order, but that can't always be the priority, or we don't get everything done. We don't get anything done, right? So I think as long as, again, the non-negotiables, which is putting in new clients, making sure that they're moving along in the process, whether that's my client or, someone on my team's client, making sure that they're moving along the process and that they have what they need. As long as that is rising to the top of my priority list, the rest falls into place. And then, when there's extra time, and there always is, when you prioritize the most important things, there's always extra time later. There just is. Right. You can kind of move to the next things, but making sure that those, money-making activities, the money makers, are always at the top of your list is kind of a good place to start, I think.
I always say there's 2 types of reps. There's reps that look for, reps, leaders, salespeople, business people, there's people who look for excuses to get deals and to produce. And then there's reps who are looking for excuses to not, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of reps that it has to be like a perfect scenario for them to go and perform. But they're always looking for an excuse. So like weather. Mm-hmm. My favorite thing, I was talking to a rep the other day, and I was like, well, hey, can you, and I asked a leader, I'm like, hey, can you take him out and go show him how you talk to companies? And he's like, I was like, and can you do that Thursday morning? He's like, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to rain. And I was just like, that is the worst way you can respond to that question for me. You're looking for an excuse to not follow through on what I'm asking you to do, right? I call the people who look for excuses to get them, I call them dandelions because they can grow anywhere, right? It doesn't need to be perfect conditions. And so when you're a single mom, I guess what I'm saying is, what do you want to say to those single 19-year-old dudes out there that think that they're too busy to work today? Or, I mean, you're a single mother, there's a million things that you could probably prioritize above going and producing or going and recruiting or going and working with your reps that you would be 100% justified in doing, but you don't ever let that stop you. Where I watch some reps and they'll let the fact that, their shoes, they're wearing the wrong shoes today be the reason why they don't go and produce that day. And to me, that rep was looking for something, he found it, right? And
right.
so you can always find her, and especially as a leader, you can always find a reason to stay busy and stuff. And so I don't want it to be redundant to what Jeremy just asked you, but how do you not let those things take priority? Priority is a bad word, just distract you from what you're, like, how do you schedule that in? Because you do have a million things else to do. Right.
Yeah, I think that we all have to get really honest with ourselves if we're ever going to make progress with our goals, right? One of my goals that I have not prioritized is going to the gym. I can literally find an excuse every day as to why I don't have time to go to the gym. That's just, it's what I've done for the past couple of years. And that's like a really honest answer, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to, so I'm not going to, right?
Do you think if you really wanted to, you'd get there?
If I wanted to, I'd be there.
Yeah,
there is nothing
exactly.
there's nothing in my life that I really want to do or really want to have that I haven't made happen or put into motion, right? There's nothing in my life that I haven't done that for if I really wanted it. And so I think to anyone who doesn't have time or feels like they don't have time to work, I think just get real honest with yourself about why that is. And sometimes that means that we're scared that if we actually put the effort forth, then we're not going to be good at it and we're probably going to fail at it. And then that really means you're a failure, right? For me, that has been the case for, periods of time during ERC and with lots of different things, right? It's a lot easier to fail when it's everyone else's fault. And when you have
or when you
reasons,
don't give it your best effort, because then you can always fall back and say, well, I didn't do my very best. So
totally. And one thing that Kevin said in a meeting once that made me laugh, but also really stuck with me, he was like, let's not be the people who are always like, I'm going to work harder than I've ever worked before tomorrow. Like, we all give ourselves that excuse, right? Where we're like, I'll make time for it tomorrow, or, I put in this much effort and that's enough for today. But if we get real honest with ourselves, a lot of times that's just about fear. If there's ever procrastination, I think it generally sort of falls back to fear.
Almost
and get
always.
honest with yourself about what is it that you're scared of. Are you scared that you're not good at this job? Well, let's go find out, right? So
I love it.
Getting to the bottom of that for me is how.
And any kind of producing, it's the same ingredients that go into being a good recruiter too. It's honestly momentum and enthusiasm or energy. Those are the things that 100%, like, once you lose them, it's hard to get back. It's the same thing, right? And so get excited. I was having a conversation this morning, and I was just like, if you're not working hard, then you don't have big enough goals. And if you're lacking motivation to go out and work hard, that means you haven't set your sights high enough. Because when you actually get excited about what you're trying to achieve, then getting there is actually so much easier, and you're going to want to choose to do that because you're actually trying to get somewhere, right? So I think a lot of our reps and leaders and things, like, they're working hard, but they don't always know where they're going or what they're trying to achieve. And so I know you're a super goal-oriented person and things. How much does that play in being able to help prioritize your time correctly?
I think that that's the only way to make sure I'm prioritizing my time correctly.
Correct answer.
Did I win?
I think I led you to that one a little. Just checking.
I love what you said. There's nothing in my life that I don't already have or that I haven't done that I didn't really want. Because Cho says this all the time. He's really good at it. Is if there's something you really want, you're going to find a way to get it, or you've already found a way to get it, right? So you either don't really want it that bad, or you don't really know what you want, right? Because it's true. Like what you really want becomes the priority, and you figure out a way to get it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we think that like time will give us clarity, right, on what we want, or, you know, experience will give us clarity, but I don't believe that. I think depth and honesty gives us clarity, right? If you're getting really real with yourself, what is it that you want or don't want? Do you think that someone else told you that you should achieve that, and that's why you're not acting on it every day? Like what's the roadblock here? Because, you know, it doesn't take 6 months to figure out that you believe in yourself and that you can, you know, go out and sign up clients for the ERC. It takes like a couple hours of training, right?
When you say depth, I mean, because when you say trust, like a lot of people don't even know what they want. It's because they've never actually spent the time. Like when you say depth, I mean, to me, that's, have you actually spent the time thinking about what does it look for me a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? It's surprising how many people have never done that, and they're just kind of going where the wind blows them, right? But like, I like that word depth, because that requires effort and it requires like real thought, because it surprises me how many people don't ever do that, and they're just kind of going where life takes them, right?
I was listening to something this morning about that, actually, where they did the study it was actually at Harvard. So it was a somewhat prestigious
Almost
school.
as good as BYU.
Almost as good as UVSC.
UPSC.
And, but anyways, they took a group of students their freshman year. They had half of them write down exactly like their game plan on what to achieve. And then they had the other group just like write down like something. I mean, it was like some of their aspirations, but it wasn't their game plan of like the group that just sat and spent 2 hours actually writing out the game plan of how they were going to like graduate and then the direction they were going to go, 50% more likely to graduate.
Wow.
That's crazy. A 2-hour activity made them 50% more likely to achieve what they were actually there to do. That other group, and who knows, maybe the ones of that group that achieved it did that on their own, right? I mean, maybe that is necessary for us to actually achieve something, is to know where we're trying to go. Very, very seldom do you just like back into greatness, right? Very seldom do you fall into it. It usually is a very, like most very successful people can tell you exactly what they did to get there. And in hindsight, they knew where they were going. Right. Very few people are like, there's a funny meme going around or whatever, reel going around where it's like, yeah, the truth is I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. But then it's showing somebody that's obviously very skilled in what they're doing. Right. But it's the same idea as, you're very deliberate with what you're going to achieve down to like the hour sometimes. And I really think that's maybe what sets you apart compared to anybody. And I also think you actually are busy and you do have a lot on your plate, and you know it requires that type of detail for you to be able to go and execute and stay organized throughout a day. And so there's a lot of people listening to this that are probably shaking their head like, yeah, there's a common sense. I promise the majority of you are not doing it. Like, I promise you're not.
It is common sense, but how many actually have done it? Like, how many have done it recently? And have you revisited it, right?
Well, and how many people do it every day? Because I know Ashleigh does.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing this daily.
Yeah, I try to. Yeah.
And do you usually do that at night, in the morning? Like, when do you usually get to that?
I feel like my like recalibration is usually on Sundays. I think that for me, my personality, if I get too granular, I can get kind of hyper focused on the wrong things. But if I know what I want to accomplish in a week, then I can kind of rearrange things. There's a lot of things that are outside of my control. If I have my days planned out to the hour and one of my kids is sick and all of a sudden that derails me, that's a problem, right? Because there are a lot of things that are outside of my control. But at the beginning of the week, if I decide these are the things that are within my control, and no matter what kind of comes up in my days and in my hours, this is what I'm going to accomplish, then generally it gets done. And also, I really hate to lose, and I love to win, but I even more hate to lose, right? So there's no worse feeling than like getting to the end of the day or the week and being like, man, I didn't really get anything done, and that's my own fault. I hate that. So
I would argue I mean, this is crazy for me to say it, but in this campaign, I think the women that we have working this campaign, we have some amazing females that are working with us. I think the women are more competitive than the guys. And yes, guys, listening to this, I'm talking to you. Like 100%. I promise I believe that you guys are actually more competitive than the guys, which is probably not something I would have thought I would say a year into this campaign. So, well, hey, we don't want to keep you too much longer. I do have one last question.
Okay.
My favorite thing about my mom was a single mom, and my favorite thing about single moms is they can't afford to have excuses. Like excuses, whether they're justifiable or not, single moms just can't afford to have excuses, and so that's why they're so amazing. Like they eliminate the ability to use an excuse to not get done what they have to get done. They take the responsibility of like being a single mom, and it really does.
There's not a backup plan.
Yeah, it rolls over into the way they do everything. And so there are a lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast. And I'm not just talking about reps. I'm just talking about just people in general, where every one of us every day has to battle the 50, you can call them distractions, you can call them excuses, whatever. But what is your message to the people that are looking for an excuse to maybe not achieve today what they could? What do you want to say to those people? Talk a little trash. I'm just joking.
So I would say, if you're being hard on yourself, it's probably because you hold yourself to a pretty high standard, right? You can't be disappointed in yourself if you didn't expect a lot out of yourself. And you can't encourage yourself from a place of like fear or worry or disappointment. So I would say if you're someone who is wanting to achieve something and you're having kind of a hard time making yourself do it, one of the most effective things for me as a single mom is recognizing the things that I have accomplished and giving myself credit for it. And being excited about that, because excitement breeds more excitement and success breeds more success. And if all I can recognize in my day is what I didn't get done, then that's all I'm going to remember. And that's what I'm going to replicate. That's what I'm going to do again tomorrow. Right. But if at the end of the day, I can look in the mirror or just be so tired on the couch reflecting on my day with my kids or whatever. Right. And say, I didn't get XYZ done, and that's like kind of important, but I'm really proud of myself for making sure that I got A, B, and C done, because I told myself I'd do those, and that was hard, but I made it happen. Then I will go and do that again tomorrow, because that feels awesome. So start recognizing what you have accomplished, and start building confidence in yourself that you can go and do that again tomorrow. I think we all get in ruts, and it can either become a deeper rut or it can become like a stepping stone for you. So hopefully that's helpful for someone.
That's awesome. So, well, I want to thank you for everything. We didn't get into any like specific, like, well, tell us how you talk to a customer this way, or because I promise you guys, that's not what makes Ashleigh really, really good at this job. One of the best people I've ever worked with at what she does. She didn't think she was a born recruiter. She didn't think she was a born salesman. But she also doesn't look for excuses not to do what she does really well. And so what makes you so great at your job are the things that we talked about today. So I appreciate you sharing. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome. And Jer.
Yeah, it's been awesome working with you. I love the perspective that you bring, and I think you make us better as a group. And I agree. It's not necessarily, you could go over, hey, this is what I say, but it's how you go about it. It's how you figure out a way. And that's what makes you successful. It's not necessarily, did you say it in this order? Did you say these words? It's, are you going to figure out a way or are you not? Right. And that's what we talked about today.
Our most organized problem solver in the company, Bryce. Right. So, all right, Ashleigh, thank you so much. Jared, let's throw that Friends music back on and end this thing.
Or a Bodaggett song.
It's going to make you feel so good.
Yeah.
All right.
See you, everybody.